You are now listening to The Social Hour.
They're not PC, so if occasional foul language turns you off, then you have all been warned. This is the calm before the storm.
I want to fuck Mr. Fantastic's sister.
Get ready for the Social Hour.
Live from Deece World Studios in Spokane, Washington. This is The Social Hour. On today's show, from the comic book company Lesser Known Comics, writer Mark Bernal and artist Kati Drinkwine. And now your host. In his stand-up comedy career, they also call him the lesser-known comic, Deece Casillas.
Malam Keen, everyone, welcome to the show. This is the Social Hour, guys. Thanks for coming around. Another great episode planned for you as usual. Before we get into that, guys, if you like what you hear and what we do over at the Social Hour Comedy Network, all the shows going on, Social Minute, Social Hour, some imperfections, the Dollar Bin podcast, and more, guys. Tell a friend. That's the biggest thing you can do. Share a link, tell a friend, let someone know. You can even go to Patreon /Deece Comedy and give us a little winky, a little nudge, a little monetary hug, if you know what I'm saying. Let us know you appreciate us. You can do a one-time donation. You can subscribe, get some behind-the-scenes exclusive content, and more. That'll give you all the information. Just go to DeeceComedy.com. Check out everything we got going on. We have a bevy of stuff we bring you every week. Now we're going to get into it with our guests. Mark Bernal, the writer of at Lesser Known Comics, and also one of their great artists, Kati Drinkwine. We're going to talk to them and about their new projects and what's going on, guys. Take a listen. All right, guys, thanks for hanging around. We are back with our guests today from Lesser Known Comics. We have Mark Bernal and Kati Drinkwine. What's up, guys? How you doing today?
Doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you. We were mentioning before the show's off there. Our region recently just got to open back up. We found, so we're happy that Corona is finally over. They announced it's done. We're done with it, I guess. Yeah, we can all go back to mosh pitting and coughing on each other, apparently. Maybe not that extreme, but we do get to at least have 25% capacity over here where we are. So I'm happy for that. Now you guys are in Mark, you said you're in Virginia. Kati, where are you at?
I am in Wisconsin right now.
Wisconsin. All right. What part of Wisconsin?
I'm in Waukesha. It's like 30 minutes away from Milwaukee, actually. So.
Oh, okay. Is that there's a club in Appleton that I perform at
really?
sometimes.
I have some friends up there.
Yeah. Actually, the people who own the club that I'm one of the club. They have a couple clubs around the Northwest and in Oklahoma and in Wisconsin. It's one of the clubs I perform at semi-regularly. You might see me there soon. I was supposed to be there a year ago, November, or about a year ago this time. It was like March of last year, but everything got canceled. So
yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll have to go catch one of your shows.
Yeah, hopefully when I'll be back out there soon. It's gonna be now that things are opening back up. But let's talk about you guys. You guys, Lesser Known Comics, you have a comic book company. You guys are starting. Have you guys published anything yet, or have yet to release a publication? Tell us about it.
We did, like a lot of people, right? Did some life reevaluation in 2020.
Yeah.
A lot of time to sit and contemplate. And I kept working on some scripts. So I'm the writer at Lesser Known Comics, and I started working with Kati and a couple other illustrators and saying, hey, I got this story. It's about this punk rock, bruja Latina witch, and she goes on adventures and dabbles in vigilantism and kills fascists. Is this something you're interested in working on? And Kati got on board with two other illustrators. And then luckily she was able to talk me out of starting with a graphic novel. Like I was like, hey, let's make this like cool, like 200 pager. And she's like, well, let's maybe start small. So we
Yeah.
kind of rescoped it using our the other illustrators to say, okay, well, what if we make a bunch of mini issues, and we're going to start releasing them hopefully next month, and we're going to lead up to our Halloween special, which I think will be our big first, release. But all the illustrators are taking on different pieces of the universe in our comic book story, taking it from different perspectives, and then their storylines will converge on our Halloween special, which will basically be like a Pineapple Express meets Children of the Corn.
That's quite an elevator pitch. Pineapple Express meets Children of the Corn. It's a really interesting process trying to put a comic book together. And I think that initial thought of like, let's do this, trade graphic novel, big thing, is ambitious, but I think the incremental is probably, you're going to find a better way to go. I've interviewed a couple, Joe Casey, Fabian Nicienza, Eric Larson, some other guys in the industry recently, and the kind of the resounding, I think Joe Casey's quote was, he's like, if you want to do comics, he's like, don't lead with your magnum opus. and I'm like, that's probably good advice. Everyone wants to do that. The big thing first. It's like, just get some stuff out there, get it going, get that traction, and so I think you made the right call there. Are you doing like individual issues in print and digital form, then, like 22-page type books at first?
So they'll be short. So the one Katie's working on, it's 9 pages, right?
Okay,
Katie. And
yeah.
I think so. We'll do both in digital and in print form. But the more talking to the scene that I've found, we're going to really try and push hard on making them exclusive to comic book stores as much as possible, because there's, if you live in Timbuktu and the only way I can get you is, through the mail, like, we'll do that. But, but for the most part, I've been blown away by the overwhelming support that comes from the rest of the indie comic book scene. And Katie can speak to being in it, because she's got, I think 7 more years experience doing this than I do. So,
wow.
We want to get it out there any way possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think for, there's that generation of people who grew up with the internet. I am not one of those. But like, I still have that need to have, that tactile in my hand, analog version of things like that. I have problems reading books, or even, especially comic books, on a tablet or something like that. Not to say there's not a great market for that. But yeah, that in your hand comic book store production is just a kind of a different animal, and really it seems more like tangible. I mean, literally and figuratively, So, is it just local comic stores, or are you getting it in? Is it going to be distributed? Are you getting in like previews so Diamond can establish it into across the nation, or how's that going to work?
One of the things that that some of the advice that I got about being doing this as an indie thing, and I don't know if Diamond's business structure has changed, but that they may or may not, their platform may or may not be the most indie friendly.
Yeah.
But the lucky thing is, using all the social media stuff, we can see, hey, we got a lot of people reading our, interested in our stuff in, Olympia or in, Anaheim or whatever. And then we can reach out to that comic book store, and then we can go directly to people and be like, hey, it's available for you right now at that place. And, especially this first year, I think the goal is to make all of them free for the first year. We're lucky enough to have an operating budget that we can kind of do that for the at least till 2022.
That $600 stimulus check's going straight into lesser known comics. No, that's great. I mean, what an opportunity if you have to be able to get people on board and kind of hooked that first hit for free, and then keep them coming back after that. So, what was kind of the catalyst for this particular show? I mean, what did you do before this, Mark, if I can ask?
I was actually in the Army for 16 years.
Okay.
So, I did not imagine I would be doing anything for 16 years, let alone, something so prohibitive on my social life and just little things like not being able to just travel on a moment's notice, So, glad to put that in the rearview mirror, but I think organizationally it left me with like some good skills.
Yeah.
One of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on is, I took a lot of feedback from Katie on what it's like for artists in the industry. I think, what's the term you said for creatives? I think you call it, Katie, and
Yeah.
what your guys' experience is like. So I've tried to build a company that kind of addresses some of those things. I don't know. You want to talk a little bit about that, Katie?
So yeah, when we first started talking about once we kind of got past like test phase, like the comics, I think we met on Upwork and we did like a little test phase. But after that, when he started actually putting this whole thing together, I kind of mentioned as for the project itself, I honestly think everything has a really strong base, etc. But what I'm interested in as a creator is there are a lot of big companies out there right now that don't really treat their employees very well. Like the gaming industry, the movie industry, like animators, designers, everybody, like they're not happy. They're not happy with what they're doing. I've been freelancing for 7-8 years now, and I've met a lot of people throughout my career, and they're just like, some of them go to really high lengths to like have these really big industry jobs, but then they find out like, wow, I'm kind of getting treated like shit. So that's kind of like my main concern getting into something like this. It's like, I want to make sure that I'm valued. I want to make sure that everyone knows like I'm a human being, like I'm going to put the work in, I'm going to be here and do my job. But at the same time, like, I don't want to be treated like a robot, so those values are really important to me, and that's why I really liked connecting with Mark, because he was really in on that right away. He seemed to vibe with it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, because I think it just goes to say, kind of where we're at in America right now. But the higher you go up in corporations and structure, and which usually means pay also. Or not always, actually, but I should say. But I mean, maybe notoriety or something like that is a better way to say it. You lose that human aspect of it, which is part of the joy of it. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to be famous and make a ton of money, but also, there's that misery index, I always call it. Like, what does that cost you to have that also? And at a certain point, no matter what you're getting back isn't quite worth, sacrificing that.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
that's why I kind of like the direction here, because it's like we want to kind of have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Where you can build on something, you can make something great, but everyone can be like happy at their job. That would be nice.
What a crazy idea! What a weird concept. Yeah, you guys should.
I mean, that's kind of what brought me this direction anyway. Like, I couldn't take my daughter on a work trip with me, for the Army, right?
Yeah.
So my daughter is 1.5 right now, and by the time we get this thing going, guess what? My mother-in-law and her, they're going to be going around the comic book conventions while I'm, at the booth, and that's the best work trip I think I could, burden my my family with.
Yeah.
my wife is like, oh, hey, they got comic book conventions here. They got comic book conventions in Italy and places like that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's
do it.
If we're going to spend the money to travel, and I can put it on the company dime, that would be the ideal way to do it. Hanging out with a bunch of comic book geeks like myself.
Yeah, get paid to travel for that, man. If you can pull that off, that's you're halfway there, I think.
Yeah. One other thing on that topic of pay and stuff, we're hoping to kind of change the big dream. Yeah, we want to make some dope comic books, but we also want to change like the industry standards and some of the things that are in our contracts, and they're available for any other comic book publisher to see, indie comic book publisher to see, is people like Katie, their pay is not contingent on a designated number of pages, storyboards, products. The contract allows for her to do things like just try out new techniques or try out new software or do something to just learn something new about the craft.
Yeah.
Because I love that saying where they talk about like what happens if you don't invest in your people, like, oh, I'm going to invest in my people and they're going to leave us. And it's like, what if you don't? And then they stay, like,
right. Yeah.
Is that the worst?
Yeah. Then you just have these stagnant people who hate you, like, really like resent you for just forcing them to do a monotonous job day in and day out. That's a really.
And Katie's a big gamer. So like, if she says, hey, there's a game release coming up, and she actually has said that, hey, what was the World of Warcraft release? I'm not doing any work.
At least there's honesty and openness between. That's a really interesting like kind of mantra with a company though, because it's true. I mean, if you can invest in your people and allow them to explore. Oh, Katie went green again. Allow them to explore. Allow them to explore. That's okay, Katie. It's all audio anyway. I just if you allow them to explore a little, I mean, yeah. How much does that actually benefit you down the road? I mean, not only are you allowing them to like flex their creative muscle, but they're doing it in a way that can now make better products for the company as a whole later.
Yeah, totally. And I get inspiration the more I learn about everybody. Me and Katie both come from like that, punk rock going to, work tour scene, so the more time we just be humans around each other, like the more we're like, oh, cool. Let's, let's make a comic book or do some pages or story about something we both care about.
Yeah. Katie, you said you've been doing this for 7 years?
Yeah. So I went to art college for a few years and then dropped out. My first actual big commission was actually in college. I did like this CCG thing that was like 60 illustrations, and I was already also working a full-time job at the time, so that was like a lot for me because I wasn't quite ready. But yeah, like ever since then, I've been kind of building up my career. Like for the first few years, it was kind of slow, building up your client base and stuff. But yeah, I've been at it for quite a while now. I've actually got like a good bit of a reputation. I have like actually a good number of clients. Like I really don't ever run out of work at this point.
That's
which is
great.
A really good thing to say as a freelancer, because a lot of my freelancer friends don't have the same luck with that. Like I actually do try to reach out and like I'll even like send extra work that I can't take to like some of my friends that I know can handle, like just to help people out. But yeah, I've done actually 2 or 3 comics before this. I'm still working on another comic project outside of this one. I've done like crazy amounts of book covers and all that kind of stuff. Like I've been doing it. I've been out here.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That is I think that's really a testament to. Boy said this like if you need a plumber and you have one that's always available, they're probably not a good plumber. Like. So when it's a testament to someone's ability and their not only ability, but it's I'm sure you guys know in a myriad of different skills. It's more than just being good at something. It's being able to apply that and being able to, work with people and communicate. It's kind of an algorithm, like conglomerate of things. But, nobody who's not good at all those things is super busy all the time.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where like building my reputation was big in part like people knowing that I'm actually going to communicate, that I'm actually going to deliver, that if I can't deliver, I'm going to tell you why and we're going to figure something out.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of actual business aspect that goes into freelancing full time. So it's been a lot of trial and error, but start from the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things with artists in any forum, because I'm a writer by trade, got into comedy after writing, and I've dealt with writers, comics, artists, musicians, and the kind of the overwhelming theme with artists is in artists in general, again, I mean this all encompassing, not just specifically people who do drawing or something, but like artists can generally be a little lazy and like a little bad at communicating. And I'll tell you this, nobody gets into comedy because they want to be up at 9 a.m. and productive. It's because they want to get stoned all day and roll into a comedy club around 7:45, eat some nachos, drink a beer, work for an hour, and go home. Like that's your average comedian's mind state. So like trying to get them to wrap their head around the business aspect, or like understanding that it is also, if you want it as a career, you have to kind of treat it as a career too, is very difficult at times,
Oh yes, yeah. I could definitely rant on that for quite a while. I'll spare you from it, but that's something I do try to impress on a lot of my art friends, like people I went to college with, or just people I've met, like people that struggle. They're like, oh, how do you get to where you are, where you have all these clients and you get to charge what you charge, etc. And it's like, well, you kind of have to like take on some parts that you don't like, and a lot of artists are like, oh, I want to do my own thing, like I want to do my own art. Well, you can do that, but you might not get to do what I do then,
Yeah, it might not be as fruitful, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, I've always said, I teach, I've taught comedy classes for a long time and do a lot of workshops and stuff. And kind of the one thing I always tell people is, and you could apply this to anything, is the more you treat it like a job, the more it will treat you like a job. So, I mean, if you want to draw casually or write casually, you certainly can. But the more you treat it like a job, the more you'll get that return. You'll find it starts to return back. And it may not be instant. You have to front load some work sometimes at no pay or on spec. But, if eventually it pays off, I think.
Yeah. And there were plenty of times I had to take on projects starting out that like I wasn't super excited about. But for me, it was more like I wanted to learn something new. I wanted to try a challenge. I wanted to see like what this client was like, what they were going to expect of me. Like, there are a lot of things I had to do building up to this point that like I wasn't super excited about, but now I get to wake up at like 10, 11 o'clock, work on some comics, have a beer if I want, like it's pretty good now, so.
Yeah, you see, you built that life to what you want. Yeah. That's the way it should be. You gotta put in that time. You gotta front load that time. I mean, you give anyone if you give someone a Ferrari, within a year, there's gonna be McDonald's floor, French fries under the seats, and trash in the back seat. But if you have someone work a year to buy a used Camry with cloth interior, they will take that thing through the car wash every week and vacuum it because they put in that work to get that goddamn thing. I think that's just kind of how you gotta have some skin in the game, as my grandpa used to say. He never said that once, but that sounds like a grandpa saying. So Mark, I have a question for you about the main character. What's the character's name, so I have some context?
So the main character, her name is Daniela. She is. So the comic book spans both present and past. And she's she goes back about like 150 years. But she's perpetually in her late 20s, like we all aspire to be.
Yeah.
And she got into witchcraft, and she kind of did what everybody else would kind of do in that situation, you know, kind of figure out a way to make yourself rich, you know, first,
Sure,
you know, take it a little bit past the limit of where you should go, you know. So one of our artists is working on a storyline where she's essentially become a witchcraft arms dealer in South America in the 80s, you know. She gets in over her head, but she also suffers from the same things that we do, where you know, maybe didn't read all the fine texts on curses and spells and things like that, and suffering from the unintended consequence of making some decisions having to do with impulse control issues, maybe.
Yeah, the selling witchcraft arms in South America. Did the U.S. government supply those arms, and then they just take them down later? Is that the?
That's what we're say.
I can either confirm or deny that. However, I am getting I do talk to so one of our artists is from Argentina, and he you know, we adapted the story a little bit because he's from wine country, Mendoza, Argentina. So we thought it would be fun. Hey, why don't she store all her little cache of witchcraft materials in a wine cellar, you know, because he's in the middle of wine country. So we kind of adapted some of the stories to do things around that. Luckily, the storyline is pretty adaptable so that we can kind of work people in. We've also talked about, you know, bringing in bands and stuff like that, you know, maybe not full blown, like, you know, solving mysteries like on Scooby-Doo, where you have, like, you know, the monkeys guest starring or something.
The
but
Globetrotters show
cool
up.
Call out. Yeah.
I love that episode.
I like the idea. Now, what inspired the story, and specifically a female? You said Latina, correct?
Correct. So initially, she was not the main character. The main character was going to be like a kind of autobiographical character, and he comes across her on a spirit journey after taking some hallucinogenic mushrooms.
Okay, now you're talking my language.
So, and we'll still keep with that storyline at a certain point, but she's more central to it. Is you know, so she has this sidekick that's kind of, you know, this guy who thought he was meeting his spirit guide, when really it's, you know, this kind of good and bad opportunistic type of witch. You know, she has her good sides too. But my parents, so my dad is Hispanic, and what I wanted to touch on was kind of the fact that I've always grown up in Hispanic neighborhoods, but my dad's generation didn't learn Spanish, and that was because when my grandpa came back from Korea, he went to go buy a neighborhood, I think in Orange County, buy a house in a neighborhood in Orange County, and they were like, nope, you know, we don't care that you have money, you cannot buy a house in this neighborhood. So my dad's generation didn't learn it, and then I grew up, you know, just kind of being in that weird thing where, oh, you're Mexican, but not really.
Yeah.
So he's going to kind of struggle with some of that too, where he's kind of placed in these positions where, you know, he should know the language. And we're going to have a little bit of fun with that, where maybe he misinterprets it something or whatever. But we also write it in both English and Spanish. The actual comics both have a lot of Spanish in it.
Oh, nice.
And that's kind of what brought us to that whole idea. And then the witchcraft part, one of our other team members, she does outreach for us, Yvette. She's the one who would always joke, you know, bruja this, bruja that, because both hippies and, you know, burning sage and Palo Santo and all that fun stuff. So
yeah. Goddamn hippies. As my girlfriend is doing the same thing upstairs, probably. Hey, let's see. We've got 4 minutes left on this Zoom, so I'm gonna send you guys a new link. Can we continue for a little bit? And we're back.
All right.
Just waiting for Katie. I'll let her jump back on here. 1 second.
So have you ever done stand-up, like tried to do like a set like in like a combined an event with a comic book store?
You know, I have not. I'd certainly try. I've done more niche shows than that in my day, for sure. And I mean, I'm such a comic book nerd, and I love. Actually, it's funny you say that because there's this comic book shop downtown Spokane, which has a big space in the back that they use for gaming. And I've actually thought about approaching them and being like, hey, how about we do like an open mic here or something like that? Or like, we've got a cool little space. You've got tables and chairs. Like, let's do an open mic or maybe do some shows. Just get any type of crossover between like things I love. So, you know.
Yeah, I think comic book stores would love for you to do the show from there.
Yeah.
With either the owner themselves or local artists there, because anything that's going to bring traffic in for them.
You mean like the podcast or stand up?
You could do, I don't know, you could probably play with the formula, but but just because I assume when you're on the road, right, you got that time between when you roll out of bed and
yeah, I've eaten at a lot of mall food courts, Mark.
Yeah. So I love that show Crashing. I'm sure you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just imagining that's your life.
Yeah, it's I have this joke about how I discovered that doing comedy, being a road comic, is really just one giant game of find the saddest mall in America. Turns out it's in Bozeman, Montana, if you guys wanted to know. At least that's the winner so far. I haven't been to all the malls, but we are losing them at a rapid pace. So, it's I just started doing another podcast too. The third episode just launched today. It's called the Dollar Bin Podcast, where I review like a trade paperback, and then I talk about some shitty comic book I found in the dollar bin at my local comic book store. So it's good. And I try not to do like mainstream stuff. I mean, like Image or some Marvel, but like kind of obscure stuff, like not it's things that everyone has necessarily read. So that might be fun to try to do from the comic book store too, like live. Because I like kind of write a script, so there's a loose script, so I have some beats and some jokes, and then just riff. So that could be fun too.
Yeah.
But,
I also had the idea. I don't know if someone's used it yet. So kind of a cross between redoing the vintage stuff and almost like Mystery Science Theater is. So on I think it's Comic Book Plus or something like that. I'll have to look at the link, but they have all the copyright-free stuff.
Okay.
Like every comic that's past its trademark or whatever.
Yeah.
And re-releasing those with new dialogue.
Oh, that'd be fun. That's a good idea.
But yeah, because we definitely, that was something I would always think would be fun on the back of our comics, like on the back end, like a mini short,
Yeah.
or take, a page or two of something like that.
Well, especially if you could chop it up and have it be like reoccurring, where it's like a continuing story, but like two pages every issue. And then, I mean, it costs you very little except for the paper, printing, because it's already drawn and stuff. You just re-letter, and you can do that pretty easy digitally.
Yeah, we'll figure that out together. So you have something to do while you're eating Auntie Anne's pretzels.
Wetzel's Pretzels and Sbarro is.
At least some malls have Orange Julius, though.
That's true, man. It is. I actually. life on the road. Well, it was easier / harder when I was drinking. So I quit drinking like 2 years ago. But man, at least when I was on the road, I could be like, I'll just go to a brewery and hang out for the day. But then also it was like I'd be on the road for weeks at a time, and it can really wear you out. I think I'm getting too old for this, man. Like I can't, it's not always the nicest hotels, and drinking all day and drinking all night. I'm like, I'm gonna die soon. I gotta stop. So I gave it up.
Well, no, I got so one of the guys who will he'll be joining the team later. He's actually been swamped. He works over at Sirius XM right now. He'll be joining Lesser Known probably by the end of the year. And the stories go. He just gave up drinking as well, and the stories go from like fun to scary to like, okay, this can't happen anymore. I'm gonna have to pull the plug on this one.
I was too functional of an alcoholic, I think, was my problem. It didn't get so bad. I mean, I've certainly had, I've, been in jail in Tijuana and stuff, okay, which is not fun. But like, that was years ago. It got to the point where it was just like, I'm like, why is this so easy for me to go through life considering how much vodka is in my body right now? And I'm like, this is probably time to take a break.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, much happier since I quit. So, it's a better life, it turns out. Or, maybe just moderation for some people. But I'm good. I'm good. What were we I wanted to talk to you, ask you more questions about the Hispanic thing. I have a lot of questions. First of all, we'll work backwards on this. It's funny, your story, because I have a similar story. I'm also Mexican or Latino, however you want to say it. I was born in America. My heritage is Mexican. My grandpa rode to America on a donkey in 1929. Like literally in 1929, my grandfather got on a donkey and rode to America. In his kids, because my grandparents spoke nothing but Spanish, so his 14 kids, because Mexican, we breed, and Catholic is what we do. We crank out a lot of them. I made up for it by having 0. We're evening out, but they all speak Spanish, but they were very hesitant to, like, my dad didn't teach us Spanish because, my grandfather instilled in them that, like, you guys are American. I fucking worked my ass off. I rode a donkey through the desert in Mexico, get here, so you could be American, not Mexican. And, like, there was, like, a stigma on it, like you say. So, we didn't get that. And it's unfortunate, really, that there was a stigma on it, but also that, we didn't get, they could have easily taught us Spanish growing up, and made us bilingual, but just, alas, no. Good goddamn racism in California. But that brings me back to
I think it's interesting, though, that generation's take, though, because, like, so my dad experienced, some pretty crazy stuff, but he's a pretty conservative guy. And even growing up, my brother, he's only a year older than me. He's 10 shades darker than me, and we were always the poorest kids in the neighborhood. So we had this like really crappy car, a Dodge Spirit, 1988 Dodge
all
Spirit.
right, yeah.
And he would get pulled over every day on the way home, because it's just like, what is this car and what is this brown kid doing in this neighborhood?
Right.
And so my brother has some very strong feelings about race, but for some reason my dad's generation was like, yeah, I dealt with it, you'll be fine.
Right.
Like it's very like much like you're making a big deal out of something you just need to work harder to get past. And it's just like, and they, makes Thanksgiving very pleasant, to have that conversation around the table.
Nothing like politics on Thanksgiving. All right, everyone get drunk, and then let's talk about things we vehemently disagree about. This is going to go swimmingly. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I don't know. I think it's just because back then there wasn't like, we should do something about it. It was just kind of like, this is the way it is. It was like expected, where now there's like this kind of expectation of tolerance. So when it doesn't happen, you're more adverse to it. It's like, yeah, I mean, my dad was born in 1949. Like, it's like there were still black people getting hung in states after 1949. I mean, like, we're not, it wasn't exactly super friendly America. I mean, not that it is in all regions now. I think we might still have some problems, it turns out. But so it's like it was expected to not be tolerant. So they're like, hey man, we just got here. Just keep your head down and work hard. Like we're not. I mean, my grandma didn't get her green card till she was in her 90s. So it's like they weren't exactly on paper either. So they're like, listen, just head down. Don't try and stir up any trouble. We don't want grandma getting deported. We're just trying to hang out is all. We're just trying to stay here. So.
Yeah, my wife is Filipina, and same story, different continent, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a weird thing, but yeah, I mean, I do love that you chose a female and ethnic lead, because I do a lot of writing also, and every time I write, I always ask the question, I'm like, can this person be a woman, and can this character be an ethnicity, like besides white? Like, can we make this not a white male? And the answer is usually yes. There's usually very little reason why you can't. So I end up with a lot of female Latina, female Black, female Asian characters, because I just think it just adds an extra interest and intrigue, instead of that typical like, oh, hey, look, it's another white guy. Nothing against white guys who listen to this show, but fuck, there's a lot of you. White Jesus
people,
Christ,
the worst.
Yeah.
And I think that people, I think there's a lot of backlash, I guess. Because being in the military, for so long, I got friends all over the country,
yeah.
And I always find actually my favorites are the ones that I disagree with the most. They're at least the most fun to go get beers with. The
sure.
ones that that say a lot of things that start with "I'm not racist," but
yeah.
But one of the things that you try and do is I try and reach out to somebody that's at least from that demographic, to try and get an idea of am I understanding this situation correctly? Because I'm lucky that I get exposed to a lot of people from different backgrounds, and it comes up just in casual conversation. Like my buddy just moved here from California, to Virginia from California.
Mm-hmm.
And his first question to any Californian who moves out of state is like, hey, how do I score some weed here? And and they're like, he was asking my neighbor who's a black guy, he's like, hey, like, do you go to there's a club in Maryland, do you go there? And he's like, yeah, that club's, it's cool if you go to that club, I can't go to that club because I'm gonna get pulled over when I leave that club,
right?
And you are not. So like it and I didn't, that story like blew me away. I was like, wait, like you're not a member? Like, I don't understand, you don't have your cannabis card? And he's just like, no, like it's just very different for me,
right,
than it is for you. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in different regions, because like I'm sure Virginia, Maryland, all those places, they're not that California is not, but there might be harsher kind of proverbial or metaphorical lines drawn in neighborhoods. When you go to California, you said you lived in Fullerton and stuff, Orange County, LA. I mean, you can go a couple blocks one direction and you can be in a wildly different neighborhood. I grew up in Long Beach, and Long Beach has a really nice neighborhood, like kind of south and southwest Long Beaches, Belmont Shores, and real nice. And then you go like a couple blocks inland and you're in a pretty dicey neighborhood, pretty quickly. And it all kind of, it just melds together a little more than I think some neighborhoods on the East Coast.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, I think also you go to places. I remember being in Baltimore for that. I spent a lot of time living in Oakland, and so but you go to Baltimore and you don't know those lines.
Yeah.
so like you just kind of wander. Like you're like, this street's just as safe as the last street. And you're like, no, very much not.
It turns out it's not. Yeah, you learn fast. I think if you grow up in the right places, though, I don't know how it was for you, but after growing up where you did and then and being in the military, you probably are pretty cognizant. But like you kind of pick up on little vibes and things and just note like, all right, this seems a little like I'm kind of noting these streets have not been clean. Like the street sweeper hasn't been through here in a couple years. Yeah. Just a little more graffiti, a little more razor wire around dollar stores for some reason. Like, okay, maybe this isn't, this neighborhood's getting worse. It's funny though. I always feel, personally, because where I grew up, I don't have any feelings like of awkwardness in bad neighborhoods. I feel weird when I get in good, affluent neighborhoods. I feel like Stepford Wives strange. I'm like, I don't know about all this. I'm like, why does everyone's lawn look nice? That's when I start to get weirded out.
Yeah, that's the big shame and irony, I think, of like what's kind of happening in America with like the urban-rural divide is like, most of us are not going to get let into the country club anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless if you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, they're at capacity for folks like me.
Yeah. Like, we're full. And then it's even being able to afford it, and that's a whole other story. So, but yeah, I gotta say I like that the character is female and Latina, though. I think that's great. I like seeing more of that, and I think we are seeing more of that, which is nice. Nothing against Captain America or whatever, but some diversity is good, and I like seeing other creators injecting that into their books too.
Yeah, actually, I think all three of the mini storylines at this point, I don't know if I did it on purpose, but they are female lead. So Katie's the character she's illustrating right now. She's actually it's set in the Mexican America War time frame.
Okay.
Origin story of one of the characters, and so she's doing that. So she's got to illustrate a couple of pages of murder and mayhem by She called dibs. They said, "Who wants to take the gunslinger storyline?" And she said, "Me."
Nice.
That's the official process for how you get assigned a story at Lesser Known.
You just dibs. Just touch your nose first. You're like, man, I got it.
It's the same way with that other one you brought up, like the punk one, where they're like fighting fascists and stuff. I'm like, yep, I'll do that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have have you seen that documentary? It's a ska documentary. I can't think of the name of it, but it's on Amazon. I think the guys from I think it was maybe Hellcat Records or like Tim Armstrong or somebody who produced the documentary. But they talked about the immigration of Jamaicans to, or actually the whole Caribbean area into the UK, and then bands like the Specials and stuff like that. And you basically had, poor whites and Caribbean immigrants that were making this, ska, this, that type of music. So we have a set of characters that are in a ska band called Roots Riot. And when they're not on stage, they are hunting Nazis. And they will cross paths with our main character at actually in the Halloween issues when they'll cross paths. But it's a really cool documentary. I wish I knew the name of it, but it's on Amazon. It's the only ska documentary I think that's out there on Amazon.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, but that was kind of inspired. Yeah, that character.
It sounds like a pretty wild and diverse universe you've created. Is this? Do you have long-term plans for this? Where how far out are you? Do you have this bad boy going?
I think we have. So we'll probably end up with 9 of the mini issues. Those are between 5 and 9 pages, and I'm using those. We're using those as extended trailers. What I always thought was like, why are they making these like 3-hour movies?
Yeah.
And then like a 4-hour extended cut? Like, just release that crap on the internet like ahead of time, so I don't have to like waste my time with the origin story. Like when I show up to the movie theater,
right?
Like I want to do that with our first full-length issues. Like you have everything you need to know about these characters before you need to know why they're like,
right,
battling monsters. Like you have all that information ahead of time, and it's for free and all that stuff. And because we gotta, that's what you need to make anyway to make a good story. But everything's we try and have it set in as much of the real world as possible. So they won't be a whole lot of world, saving the universe type of things. It's more, these are more stories that are kind of about relationships and people who come from different walks of life and things like that, and see what their struggles are. We just kind of add the witchcraft and the magic and some of the other stuff because it's a much more fun story to tell that way.
Well, I think using the archetype or kind of mysticism or superheroes or kind of that world as an archetype for or an avatar for actual real stories. I mean, I think the characters is the most important part. I mean, that's what I found, like more contemporary writers that have the most success in comic books, even if they're writing something as long running as like X-Men, it's always character first. You find there's very little X-Mening going on, but a lot of like characterization happening, and that's when I think it's most interesting and most successful.
Yeah, I think one of the best, after the Civil War movie came out with for Marvel, that was such a compelling story about personal relationship, and the fact that like me and my wife actually got into a really like heated argument where we like stopped talking to each other for maybe 24 hours because we landed on very different sides of that Captain America, Tony Stark divide.
Which side were you on?
I had to side with Captain.
Yeah, so she was with Tony Stark, huh?
And she was just like, "You're ridiculous. Look at you, Mr. American exceptionalism. You think you guys, you think you can do whatever you want. Guess the army really brainwashed you."
But
it got personal really quick.
Well, just straight for the jugular, man. You just call her a corporate fascist. She's always with those corporations, all the money. I see how it is. I don't know. I think I side with Captain America on that one too.
Where did you land, Katie?
Oh man, I don't know. When I watch movies like that, for me, it's like I like looking at the whole thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm a really big empath, so my problem is like I kind of see a lot of different sides, and I'm like, oh, well, I guess everyone kind of has a stance, kind of has a point, but.
Very neutral.
Yeah.
Were both you guys comic book fans growing up always? I mean, must have been in some capacity to want to get into the medium.
So for me, I mean, I've always grown up with like, I grew up really, really poor. So like for the most part, pretty much all the way up until like, I mean, honestly, until I've had this career for myself, like I haven't had a lot of money. So like the only comic experience I had was like once in a while, my dad would bring home like these really obscure comics he'd find at like stores he'd come across, or like for some reason a bar was selling them at one point, and
Right.
he happened to go to that bar a lot. But he brought home a lot of these like really interesting comics, and like I loved art right away. Like Mark said, I'm also like a really big gamer, so that was kind of my inspiration as an artist as well. But yeah, I would just kind of end up reading like these really obscure comics over the years, and then eventually I've actually started collecting a little bit now. I want to collect more, but I'm going to wait until I move and have a bigger space. But I do like keeping up with comics quite a bit now.
What are you reading?
What am I reading currently? I did recently, well, not recently, it's probably like a few months ago, but I got this full hardcover edition of like a bunch of different Deadpool comics.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, Deadpool's one of a really favorite of mine. So there's that one. And then I also, gosh, what is it called? It's the one that was like the fairy tales comics, like the gosh, what is the name of it? I know I have the comic somewhere, but I don't think it's like right next to me.
Oh.
But it's also based on, there's also a game that went over. It's not like fairy tale like the anime, but like it has like the big bad wolf, but he's like a detective. But gosh, I don't know the name of it. But I do like that series. I want to collect more of them because I only have like one or two.
What is that? It was by
like, do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know why it's slipping my mind. So
what was
badly,
the guy? It was like Bill Wilhelm or something. What was the guy's name that was the? Yeah, I know that. Why is that slipping my mind too? I can't think.
Because it's got like all of those stories in it. It's got like Little Red Riding Hood in there somewhere. It's got like the Three Little Pigs. Like it's got all of those fairy tale things, but they're humans, and they're in this like dystopian setting where it's kind of more like he actually investigates like real crimes, like these guys are like killing each other and stuff.
Yeah, God, I feel like an idiot. I can't remember that right
so
now.
Bad now.
Let's see.
But yeah.
Anyway.
So I was never big on like the superhero stuff. I was more to like those kind of comics.
Right on. There's some great stuff out there. I don't know if you ever read anything by Brian K. Vaughan. But if you like stuff that's not superhero but very interesting stuff, he has some very unique ideas. Like he had a series called Why the Last Man, Y as in the letter Y, the last man, and it's about how everything with a Y chromosome except for this one kid, like kind of 20-year-old, dies. So it's just him, and everything else in the world is an X chromosome. So it's an interesting story. He wrote Saga, which was really wildly popular. That's got about 54 issues out there, kind of a sci-fi romance adventure thing. That's really fun. So
I wouldn't mind checking that out.
Yeah, I would suggest anything by Brian K. Vaughan. He's really, really, really good. So. What about you, Mark? You reading anything or did read anything? What's your background with that?
So similar to Katie, yeah, I would get comic books sporadically, but it just didn't have a lot of money growing up, and so what ended up happening for me was actually when they put the Watchmen series on HBO, I was like, I'm going to reread Watchmen, and I did it through my like a tablet.
Mm-hmm.
So I used the Comixology app, and then because I had read it when I was younger, but that stuff was over my head, when you're like 12, 13.
Right.
And
a little deeper than that, it turns out. Yeah. Cold War, nuclear warfare. What?
And then, but I was always a big X-Men fan. So I'm actually rereading the X-Men in timeline chronological order right now.
Interesting.
Some blogger put them all like every single variant issue into some, like, you can go completely in timeline order. So I'm still in Silver Age right now, but that's what I'm working through.
So I have a sad story and then a question for you on that, because I am a huge X-Men fan. That was always my favorite series growing up. At one point when I moved from California to Washington, I didn't plan on moving. I was just leaving. I was going to kind of be on the road, just kind of hanging for a couple months. So I put all my stuff in storage in California, and I had a collection of probably 2,500, 3,000 individual comic books, right? And I had the entire Uncanny X-Men run up until what was current about 10 years ago, every issue. And every issue of the X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, like New Mutants, everything X-related, basically. And the entire collection was stolen from my storage unit while I was gone. Very sad, very sad. And I kind of gave me some like PTSD where I couldn't look at comic books. I couldn't go to a comic book store. And even now, every time I do, I still kind of get this like, oh, it's just fruitless. I should just give up. But I tried to get back into collecting a couple times since then. I had a couple little runs. And now I just kind of buy trade paperbacks of like things I want to read. I don't really buy monthlies anymore. But as an X-Men guy, do you have a favorite writer, a favorite run, a favorite artist? Kind of, what do you...
That's tough. You know, I think initially, like, everything that came out, you know, in the 90s was like what first drew me in, right? Sure. And then I was really like X-Force when I was like a young kid, because I was just like, you know, Cable is a total badass and everything. Yeah. What's been surprising to me on the reread, because even though I'm going chronologically, I've skipped around a couple of times. I like Excalibur way more than I ever think I did back then. And I was just like, the writing's funny. Like the art is amazing. Like I just was kind of like, where has this been? Like, I don't know why I didn't give it the time of day when I was younger. So that's kind of, I don't recall who the exact artist was, you know, on those initial
Alan Davis probably was an early artist on it. I know. Who else? But yeah, anyway. So.
But that's what's been standing out to me lately. A lot of that. It's almost like a comic that's like it almost has like an Archie feel to it at some points, you know, where it's like, so I really enjoyed it because it mixes two genres.
Well, I think Chris Claremont just had more flexibility and freedom on that than he did on the Uncanny X-Men. They're like Excalibur, like, yeah, if it's selling, do what you want, man. We don't really care. So he had that ability to kind of make it more fun and do stuff he couldn't do. And plus, it's like characters Marvel didn't care about. So they're like, you know, they're like, yeah, Captain America and Megan, who cares? Like, we don't know what that means. Like, or Captain Britain, I mean. Yeah. So.
The thing though that I think really like inspired me to do like a big universe is Ed Piskor's X-Men Grand Design. Have you read that?
What is it? Say it's which writer?
Ed Piskor. He's just an illustrator, but he did basically like it's like an overview of the X-Men universe, and it's just called X-Men Grand Design. There's two of them. Okay. It's like a must for any X-Men comic. If you get that comic book and it doesn't blow your mind, like I will reimburse for that comic book.
All right, I'll look.
That is a guarantee.
I'll look for it. I'll be on eBay later today, so I'll look for it and I'll see if I can find some copies and can follow up with you on that. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're running out of time on the second one, and I got a jet anyway, so we'll get out of here for the day. Before we go, though, please let people know individually where they can find you, social media, follow you, etc., the company, and make sure all the links to get to you guys and what you're doing.
So yeah, the big thing, Instagram is really the primary platform right now. So
Okay.
Instagram, just check out Lesser Known Comics, and we do have a lesserknowncomics.com and contact at lesserknowncomics.com. You can reach out to us. Our website's it's in a growth stage right now. It's the awkward teenage years of our website, so it doesn't have all the features that it needs to have. So Instagram is everyone's best bet.
Okay. Katie, do you have a art page where people can find you, find your art, follow you also?
Absolutely. So I do have an art station where you can just search Kati Drinkwine. Probably the only one you're going to find. I also have an Instagram that I post on a little more often. My tag for that is x.list, so just the word thoughtless and an X before it. It's pretty simple. But again, if you just search Kati Drinkwine, you'll probably find the same thing. So,
all right.
Yeah, so those two things.
Sounds good. And guys, when can people look forward to the first issue coming out?
March. So we'll be, so anybody who's following us on Instagram, they will be bombarded with some information on how to get that both in digital and print form. So, hopefully, mid-March at the latest, but we're really shooting for beginning of March.
All right. Well, guys, go to Lesser Known Comics on Instagram. Follow all of them. Follow Katie's page. Check out her art. And ask your local comic book shop how you can get copies of the book when it comes out at the retail store. And what's the name of the book again?
So right now, all the mini issues are under the name Lesser Known Comics. So it'll be Lesser Known Comics issue number 1, Lesser Known Comics number 2.
Perfect. So ask for Lesser Known Comics and get them at a retailer near you. They're free. Get some copies, and then look out for the big bad crossover explosion when everything happens in Halloween. So, all right, guys. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I'd love to talk to you again, hear more about what's going on, so keep me updated. As for me, guys, go to deececomedy.com. Check out everything going on. We've got some live events coming back and more. You know what to do. But that's it for this show, for the Social Hour and Lesser Known Comics. And Mark and Katie, I've been Deece. Thanks very much, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.